Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Grey's Anatomy, Season 3, Episode 18, My Favorite Mistake. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. As always, we'll start with the patients. So we have a man come in who has pain in his foot. At first, he doesn't want to show Christina, who's working at the clinic, but ultimately he does end up showing her, and we see that his foot has a severe infection and he is a type 2 diabetic. This then leads to her running some tests, and it is discovered that the infection has gotten into the bone and his foot will need to be amputated. And he, of course, is very resistant to this idea because, nobody ever thinks it'll be them. And he didn't think it would be him, and he thought he would just let it go a few days because he had to work, but then the pain got to the point where he had to come in, and now he's losing a foot, whereas had he just come in from the start to the free clinic, missed one day of work, which he has to miss now anyways, he could have kept his foot. So there's a lesson to be learned. The second patient was a mother and daughter pair. The mother had a rare condition which turns her muscle into bone when the muscle experiences any sort of trauma. And at this point, the mother really only has a little bit of movement in her face and her hands. Everything else has been frozen into a statue. And she's brought in by her daughter, who's basically made her mother her entire life and is building a dollhouse with her, which her mother used to make, but now she does most of it. And is very overprotective, not letting the interns really get close or wanting to let them do any procedures if they show even the slightest bit of clumsiness, because if they bump her or knock her in the wrong way, her mother will freeze up or continue to freeze up as her muscles continue to turn to bone. And the mother expresses to Izzy when her daughter's out of the room that, her daughter doesn't even seem like a person anymore, that she won't even let her speak on her own behalf, that she's become like too closed off in caring for her, and that she just, wishes that she could talk to her more. And she already knows that she's going to die, as she's already exceeded the life expectancy for her specific condition. And then once the mother does die in the operation because they aren't able to save her because of the bones being in the way, Izzy then basically tells the daughter what the mother couldn't. To basically go out, experience life, when she falls, she won't turn to bone, so she can let herself fall, things like that. And then the third patient is continuing with the Jane Doe, who we know is Rebecca Pope, but at this point she still has amnesia. So she gets reconstructive surgery on her face, and a lot of the episode is spent with her trying to decide which version of her face, like of what they mocked up based on her bone structure, her face could have looked like, to decide what she will end up looking like. And to help her decide, Karev gives each of the faces, because she has 3 options, a name and a backstory, and she ultimately decides on Ava, who is what... So Ava is the name that she will go by going forward until she gets her memories back and remembers what her actual name is. And then on the drama side, we have all of the attendings, plus Colin from the last episode, interviewing with the board to become chief. They found out Colin has a 10-year plan, and so the other attendings also try to work on 10-year plans. Sloane then goes to Bailey for advice on what she thinks the hospital needs, and she basically scolds him for getting in her way because she has a job to do, and she calls it like her right now plan, and that is what he then brings into the board and ends up with the greatest result out of all of the attendings. Even Richard praises him for having a right now plan. We then have Christina, who's still at first questioning the marriage, but she has a plan to just go back to the way things were. However, Burke says that he wants to grow and continue forward. He doesn't want to go back. And so ultimately, she decides that, she still wants to be with him, but she doesn't want the big wedding or like the religious wedding or anything like that. And she tells him that she also doesn't want a veil and like basically walks him through what she would like for the wedding, which seems to be okay with him. I say seems because I know the future, this being a rewatch, so more on that later. Then we have the biggest drama, I would say, is the aftermath of Izzy and George's infidelity the previous episode when they got drunk. Izzy wakes up first. She leaves the room, has a shower, and starts getting ready for work. George wakes up and he has a blackout. His memory is not there currently. And so he does not realize that he slept with Izzy, and he goes into work smelling of alcohol, which panics Callie, who is over the previous night's fight. And Callie informs him that her dad is in town and that George has to meet him. At the meeting, Callie's dad basically wants a postnuptial agreement, offers to buy them a house, a car, like basically fund their lives. George, during this meeting, regains his memories of what happened between him and Izzy, and they then decide to, well, basically, he denies that he wants anything to do with Callie's dad's money. Callie's dad then comes to him afterwards and respects the fact that he stood up to him. And George reiterates that he didn't know Callie was wealthy and he doesn't want her money. And the dad basically approves of him. And when Izzy and George then speak, both having their memories, George says that it was a mistake and that it is something he'll have to live with before leaving and returning to Callie. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll rank the episode first on the mostly objective ranking, followed by the personal ranking. So to start, we have our single episode supporting characters, and we have Doug Kendry, who is the amputee, and then Kathy and Nina, who are Kathy is the mother who's turning to stone, or rather bone, and Nina is the daughter. Then we have the multi-episode supporting character introduction, which is the introduction of Callie's father, Carlos Torres, who is played by the actor, I think, who did the bodyguard in Princess Diaries, if I'm not mistaken, which was pretty cool because I always liked his voice. And then supporting relationship development, George meets Callie's dad for the first time. Meeting the parents is a big development in the relationship. Then we have the multi-season supporting character development, which is Rebecca undergoing her reconstructive surgery and choosing the name that she will go by rather than Jane Doe. She will now be known as Ava until she gets her memories back. And then we have the world building aspect, which is the chief interviewing, or not the chief, but because the chief is still at this point deciding to retire, the interviews for his replacement take place during this episode, and not only Colin, but all of the other attendings, Addison, Burke, Shepard, and Sloane, all get to interview with the board. Though the interviews are shown off screen, all of the scrambling and prep work for them is shown. And then we have our negatives, and there are two negatives that are essentially the same thing, but I still felt it was important to separate them. First off is Izzy wakes up and does not tell George what happened when she realizes he lost his memory, and instead goes about her workday incredibly awkwardly, including asking Addison for advice on how right it felt to her at the time, and that maybe that meant it was supposed to happen. But Addison basically told her, no, let it go. But obviously, like, if you've been intimate with someone, especially if they've been unfaithful and they don't remember, I think she should have told him. So I think keeping it a secret was negative messaging, -2. But then also, when George does remember, he then confronts Izzy, and then he decides that they're both going to keep it a secret from Callie, basically doing the same thing because, and his excuses, is something I have to live with. But it's like your partner should be shown enough respect to be aware of the fact that their partner is unfaithful and, get any checks that they may need to have done so as to avoid potential illness and far-reaching consequences and just the emotional, you know, you can't consent to stay if you don't have all the facts on what happened. You know what I mean? Like, it's you have a zero tolerance for infidelity and you don't know that your partner was unfaithful, then you don't know that you should be out here, then you can do that too. But you also have to be aware that things need to be worked on because this has happened. And I feel like at this point now the relationship's fake because Callie is not aware of the full situation that she is in. And again, I find that to be very negative. So again, another 2 points for George keeping a secret. And once all of the points are considered, it is a 9 out of 10 episode. Which brings our mostly objective ranking to in first, where the boys are Don't Stand So Close to Me, Great Expectations, Wishin' and Hopin', Walkin' on Water, Drownin' on Dry Land, Some Kind of Miracle, Let the Angels Commit. This episode comes in ninth, My Favorite Mistake, followed by I Am a Tree, Time Has Come Today, Oh, the Guilt, Staring at the Sun, From a Whisper to a Scream, 6 Days, What I Am, Sometimes a Fantasy, and then Scars and Souvenirs is currently last place. Personal ranking. Well, as mentioned, infidelity is one of my biggest no-nos. I personally have zero tolerance for it. Some people do forgive their partners. I don't know how or why they would, but some people do it. So of course, anything that's surrounding infidelity, I'm not overly fond of. Um, I did like both of the new patients in this episode. I do think Alex is basically pulling an Izzy and getting a little too attached to his patient. Um, the chief interviews, I did find the scrambling to be amusing. Especially Sloane, he's showing his clever side. Honestly, I didn't know where to put it on the mostly objective ranking because I don't think it fits into anything. Because he was pretty open about what he was doing and like openly admitted it. So it's not like necessarily a negative messaging her behavior. Like he goes to Bailey specifically to ask her for input on his chief interview and like what she thinks the hospital needs, and then she goes off on the right now plan. I have to do this, I don't have time for that. What matters is, the right now. And then he runs with that. But it's like he went to her for that. So, it's not really stealing her idea or anything like that. One, because she wasn't in the interviews, and two, he went to her pretty open about the fact that he wanted to get input from her, which he then used that input to decide on the right now plan and basically took that and ran with it. Though, I mean, another argument could be made from a different angle that, technically that's her idea. She didn't say he could use it. But also, like I said, he was pretty open that he was going to her for advice and took it. So, I mean, she spoke, he listened, and he took that and brought it into his interview with the chief, which ended up making him successful. Then there was also the fact that he decided to use Meredith to do a surgery on her own to show that he could be a good teacher by letting her do the bone graft on her own. And it also benefited her because both Derek and Richard were treating her kind of more delicately after her mother's death and the near drowning. And Sloane pointed out that, it's a win-win. He looks like a good teacher and she gets to show them or remind them that she is a surgeon. And so she does do the procedure and she is successful at it, which ends up working out. But then again, also makes him look good. So I think as far as like, if we're going based on schmoozing versus actual merit, I think Sloane would get the promotion. If we're going based on actual merit, well, I think Burke and Shepard are both a little bit more impressive. Even Addison is a little bit more impressive. Just on my personal opinion, obviously. I could be completely wrong. I'm not part of the medical field, therefore I cannot speak to which vocations or which categories, or I know there's a word for it and I can't think of it now, but which of the types of surgeons are more talented than others or harder or easier. I can't speak to that. I don't know. But just from my personal opinion, from the outside looking in, I would say Sloane's field is probably the least impressive to me personally out of all of them. And ultimately, I enjoyed the episode. I found it entertaining, but the main plot point was the aftermath of the infidelity, and I really did not enjoy that. And I did find the patients interesting, but also there was kind of a theme of bad choices. Like, for example, ignoring an infection in your foot to the point where you ended up having to have it amputated. Not great messaging. And I did feel sorry for him. And then, of course, the mother-daughter pair not communicating, the daughter becoming more and more and more overprotective and closed off from the world because of what she saw happening to her mother. Things like that. It just didn't necessarily speak to me personally as something that I would relate to. And for that reason, I decided to give it a 6 out of 10. And that brings the personal ranking to Some Kind of Miracle, Walk on Water, Drowning on Dry Land, Wishin' and Hopin', Great Expectations, Don't Stand So Close to Me, 6 Days, Where the Boys Are, From a Whisper to a Scream, Staring at the Sun, Let the Angels Commit, I Am a Tree, What I Am, Scars and Souvenirs, Sometimes a Fantasy, and then I put this episode in 16th, My Favorite Mistake, which is then followed by Time Has Come Today and Oh, the Guilt. And that brings us to the series ranking so far, where we're ranking each of the seasons against each other. And on our mostly objective ranking, Season 1 is in first place, followed by Season 2, with Season 3 at a total score so far of 121 out of a possible 230. Meanwhile, on the personal ranking side, Season 2 is in first place, followed by Season 1, with Season 3 at 145 out of a possible 230. But with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 3, Episode 18, My Favorite Mistake. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.